Tonight we tell again what may be the most well-known story in the world. Whether you have faith or not, whether you believe the details of a virgin birth or of a star magically appearing in the sky, whether you call yourself a Christian or religious or spiritual, whatever your age and wherever you're from, chances are you know the story of the manger. For tonight we hear the story of the gospel according to St. Luke, according an accounting of what happened in those days. And the story settles in around us as Krista read for us. It settles in for us like a warm blanket by a fire on a cold night. We humans are suckers for a good story, aren't we? And this one never disappoints. Sure, we know how it goes. There are some lines we wait to hear every year, and maybe we whisper along under our breath as someone reads them aloud for us. Many of us who celebrate both Christmas and Easter, these two holidays bookend a very human life. And we already know the ending, that at first seems tragic and then is cause for choruses of hallelujahs. So well known is this story that maybe we tune it out altogether. We don't fully listen. Oh, we know it. We don't need to listen again. Or maybe so well known is this story that we listen even more deeply to the silences, to what the story doesn't say, to the narrative gaps and the mysteries lost to us but known to God and maybe to the ages. For in those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered, which is to say counted. Now, the narrative voice that tells us about this census sets us in a time and a place. It grounds us in the specificity of who and when and where we are. And the gospel voice that begins this tale also sets us in the difficulty of the moment, the political struggles, the warring parties, the fractions, the lands divided, the discords among the populace. Now, in those days, it was Rome, and Rome alone, that could order account of all the world. And we can be clear that Rome is doing this as a matter of taxation, not of representation. We can also be clear that by saying all the world, Rome is specifically saying people other than us. Rome wants to count non-Romans. Think back on your own world history lessons or your American history lessons, or think perhaps about the lessons you didn't get of Black history or Indigenous history, the lessons that weren't taught because we were always taught from the side of the ones who had power. Think of what you know of this history. And now think of Rome back in those days. Rome counting all the non-Romans. What's behind the count? Is it for help or for hinder? Is it for good or for evil? For aid or for oppression? In nearly 2,000 years since this story was first told, I'm willing to hazard a guess that we humans know how it goes, and that we've been going along with it ever since. Now, long ago, in a place very far away, in a land far, far away, there lived a young maiden. She was not a Roman. She wasn't anything at all, truth be told. She'd never been counted before. And she was only going to be counted this time because now she has a man. She's engaged. And this is a part of the story we don't get, the engagement. We don't get the engagement. Truth is, we never get a wedding either. But when we meet this young woman, we're told she's engaged to a nice Jewish boy from a good family named Joseph. And next thing we're told is that she's pregnant with the child of God, and then she and Joseph have to go be counted. And then a babe is born. And on the story goes that we know so well. Do you think any of this was Mary's idea of her engagement when she accepted that sweet young man's proposal? Did she have visions of a dream wedding in her mind, ones that didn't involve maternity wear or a nursing child? What hopes had Maiden Mary had for her own life, for her and Joseph's life, for the family they would build, for their life, their dreams? When the angel Gabriel shows up one night and tells her everything she knows is about to change. As all of this is happening, what do you suppose Mary actually wanted? Scripture's silent. She wasn't counted. What did she want? What do any of us want? Out of our one wild and beautiful life, what were Mary's dreams before God showed up with other plans? So often we think of how Mary said yes to God and thus begins the most famous story of all time. But let's also think about what she gave up. What of her own self and her own hopes and her own plans and her own dreams and her own relationship, her own engagement, maybe even her own wedding plans? They all went out the window that night that Gabriel showed up. Gabriel says, "Fear not." Fear would frankly be a very acceptable emotion. Now on this night, 3 years ago, 2019, we were here telling this story as we did tonight and singing the carols we very much are singing tonight. 3 years ago, not very long ago at all, and certainly no farther away than the pew right in front of you, we came to celebrate Christmas Eve exactly as we always had. And as far as we knew, precisely as we always would. The next year, we were all in our homes. Remember that night, singing carols on Zoom? And the year after that, just last year, some of us were here, but it was a silent night, for congregational singing wasn't yet part of our COVID-safe protocols. And this night, we gather in the midst of bitter cold, and with flights and plans and electric grids and families snarled across the country. 3 years ago, we were happily minding nobody's business, barely paying attention to our own, most likely, and we came into Christmas Eve worship as if it were a long winter's nap, a promise to come every year. I don't have to go to church again for another year. I'll come back. It will always be here. Christmas Eve, just the way it always was. Just the way it always was. Seems we took a lot for granted that year, 3 years ago. For the world has changed. The world changed that spring. There were angels all around us in those early days of 2020. Do you remember them? Angels telling of caution and speaking words of comfort that few of us could hear. We had plans for that year, friends. We had plans for March and plans for April. We knew what we were doing for Easter. We were going on summer vacations. We had things planned. And a pandemic showed up. And it changed and changed and changed and changed. And we began to change. Plans and plans and plans. Take a look at the world around you. Take a deep look at quick, honest, and private glance inside your own soul. Of all those plans, of all those changes, of all those hopes, of all that went out the window, of all that you hold tightly to now, how are they working out for you? How are all the plans of the past 3 years or the past 3 days working out for you? Gone now are the days when we said things like, won't it be nice when we can just get back to normal? Most of us know there's no such thing as going backward or of whatever normal was now. Sure, we still have questions about going back to the office, questions too about travel and masks and when can we see the grandkids. And oh, how we long to have plans again on the calendar, and many of us did this year. How are they working out? We hosted a wonderful Thanksgiving at our house this year. I had COVID the week after. I can't tell you the number of friends and family and congregants that I know that have been to a holiday party and then out of work the next week. Yesterday, we replaced 2 members of the orchestra who had come down. is something ill. Change and plans, I don't know which is worse these days. And now it is the end of 2022 and this weather that is stranding people without power. People are cold, people are hungry. On such a bleak midwinter's night, we gather to tell a simple story. 2022 is ending, at least in my own book, much like 2021 did and 2020 before it, which is to say, not soon enough. We have plans. We want to get back to them, back to them, and to them. But what have we learned in this pandemic time? What have we already forgotten about this pandemic time? Do you remember back to that spring of 2020 when we were planting seeds on our windowsills in our apartments? Do you remember that late March when we told each other about the daffodils we just saw poking up in the park and how they were giving us hope? Do you remember the empty grocery stores and the out-of-stock Amazon? And yet, here we all are. Who here didn't actually have all they needed? Do you remember the canceled vacations and the friends you couldn't see? But what are the relationships now that you have? Are they stronger or are they more distant? The pandemic has been so much on my mind these last 3 years, naturally, and I know it has been on yours, and I find myself resistant to letting it go now just because I don't want to wear a mask anymore. That's not a good enough reason. Or because I want to go to a crowded bar for a holiday night out. That's not a good enough reason. It's been here. It came with a lesson, many. And I'm holding fast to the days that were both busier and somehow more human. I think we learned things during these past 3 years, startling things, terrifying things, and if we're honest about who we really are, what we actually need, and what we desperately need to change. I also think our memories are short, and the pull to get back to whatever normal we thought it was is strong. I wonder if it was like that for Mary and Joseph, too. Back to the carefree days when they were just two young kids in love. One day they got to talking and a little carried away, and before you knew it, Joseph was down on one knee. And Mary said she'd love nothing more. Big dreams those two little kids had, big dreams for themselves and for a life they imagined. It was going to be glorious. Just the two of them, out there against all odds. Out there in the world, just them and the family they would grow. Big dreams. Yet little did they know that God had even bigger dreams in store. We too have big dreams and big plans, and we have made our way to this night thinking we know exactly what we want for Christmas. But of course, the miracle of Christmas is that it's not about what we want at all. It wasn't for Mary or Joseph or those beautiful shepherds banding together up in the nearby mountains. It isn't about what we think we want. That is, it's about our ideas. It's about our ideas of where to go and where not to go back. For Christmas, when we let it, is a surprise. It should come as a surprise, a complete and total surprise. But we, the people of plans, don't much go for surprises, which leaves us rather out of practice each December the 25th. We who like to know how the story will end before we embark upon the journey, we who have career plans and college plans and romantic plans and family plans, we don't like surprises interrupting our well-thought-out ways. Surprises, like a pandemic that maybe taught us more about what we don't need and gave us glimmers of more hope of what we don't need than we'd like to admit. Surprises like winter storms that roll in like angels from the realms of glory, bringing fear and danger. But something more, too. Surprises like a newborn child, born to an unwed young mother who had never before been counted, but who God said, "You, favored one, count." And if so then how about now, friends? We can't let a good pandemic pass us by without taking stock of the miracles and surprises we still need, the ones we don't want to admit, because we're afraid of letting someone, maybe even ourselves, down. Enter the angels with their songs of fear not. Enter a brave young woman and her beloved fiancé. Enter prophets and astrologers and magicians from far away who followed a star out on a cold midwinter's night. Enter Christmas. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light, and those who lived in a land of deep sadness, on them joy has come. Said the night wind to the little lamb, "Do you see what I see?" And suddenly there was an angel with a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace among all." Oh, we know this story, we think. We know it through and through, right? We know the lines, we know the players. We think we know the ending. We think we know it like the back of our hand, of how we know our own lives. But on this night, this one, there is something we simply will never know. Not in any way of any human understanding, that is. And that is the miracle of how God again and again and again breaks through all our well-trod and well-worn-out ways to simply draw us closer to the life we don't even dare to imagine for ourselves. There is a joy that comes every Christmas morning. There is a love that lies sleeping in a cradle. There is hope in the laughter of the young angels in the back of this sanctuary tonight who punctuate our service with their voices. There is a hope in every Christmas story. And wrapped all around us is the promise that God is doing a new thing, perpetually a new thing. And it has to do entirely with you, with each of you, with all of you. Each of you gathered this night is gathered for God so loved the world that God will always do a new thing. Said the Queen to her people everywhere, "Listen to what I say. There's a child sleeping in the night. He will bring us goodness and light. He will bring us goodness and light." I haven't asked you what you wanted for Christmas, and you haven't shared your lists with me, but I'm going to venture that neither goodness nor light are on a single list in this room. Tough. Here it is. Will you turn these gifts away because you didn't even know you wanted them? That they were even a possibility? Or this Christmas, might you take a deep look at goodness and light and welcome God in newborn flesh, God who is hastening to you again and again, God who is always with you and always, always calling you to a new and fuller life that God and God alone has imagined for you. Call it joy. It is for you and for all the world. Merry Christmas.